So we'll give it another minute. It'd be good if people can say hello as they join, just to see who we've got and what countries we've got. And
Sure. I thought what would be quite interesting is if we go around the table and everyone kind of gives
yeah,
a little spiel about sort of your experience with Yammer and gamification and what you're hoping to get out of this session. I thought it'd be interesting to go around the table like that. So
great idea.
shall I kick off? So when it comes to my own experience with Yammer gamification, I have none at all actually, but I do have experience with gamification. My company sort of designs and builds intranets, and we're quite often asked to build gamification elements into those intranets. Um, but in every case, the gamification bits are there to drive specific business goals and outcomes. So, like an example is, for example, we used gamification for a campaign aimed at driving employee understanding and buy-in of the company's. They had some newly created corporate values, and we used gamification to drive the understanding of that. So that's just one example. But in each of the things that we've built, there's always been sort of social elements that have worked alongside the gamification. You know, stuff like comments and sharing and likes and praise. But what we haven't done, as I said, is used Yammer gamification. So I'm quite interested and curious in seeing how it works when you've got the Yammer, the social bit, at the core of the gamification.
Gotcha.
So that's kind of what I'm interested in. I'm interested in hearing sort of the use cases that are out there, what people have done and seen. And another thing as well is I've heard that there's some apps out there like Badgeville is one that I've heard, and Red Critter is another one that I've heard of. I wanted to hear if anyone's got any experience of those as well.
Yep. Yep. Good. Yeah, who wants to go next? Well, I might as well go next, actually. So my name's Scott Ward. This is my business, Digital Infusions, and we do a lot of work in the social space, and so gamification is a key component of building a good social strategy. So we use it in Yammer. We've done some stuff with Red Critter and Badgeville. Actually, interesting you mentioned those two. The other one is Bunchball. That has an enterprise product, but yeah, we don't always use those products because there's a lot you can do without those products. So yeah, happy to share some of the stuff that we've done and actually hopefully get a bit of a discussion so there's not too much. So we can learn from the crowd because I think quite often the real intelligent sit within the other people in the room, like Dan was saying then actually. So that's pretty much us. Is there someone to go next?
Yeah, hi, it's Peter. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Stan Garfield here. I work at Deloitte. I lead the Yammer program globally for Deloitte. I have experience with gamification prior to Deloitte at HP, where I ran the knowledge management program, and we had a successful gamification program called KM Stars. I've been unsuccessful so far in getting that to be implemented at Deloitte, but I'm interested in doing something similar using Yammer. We actually have Badgeville license, but not for use with Yammer. We use it for something else. So we're trying to see if we can do a pilot with that, but I'm very interested to see what other people have done.
Yeah,
cool.
Hi, it's Kirsty here. I've done quite a bit in gamification in terms of e-learning and building those programs for some of Australia's top enterprises. Usually it's been around compliance, where we're trying to make compliance a little bit more interesting instead of just clicking through the buttons. I haven't actually had the opportunity to deal with it within Yammer, so that's where I was interested in the conversation and what that actually looks like and how it ties into Yammer. I've done a lot in the Yammer space and in terms of training and end user piece, and I'm having a look at how that ties in terms of that social platform and what it looks like.
awesome.
Cool.
I'll go next. Lee Shubert, I work for Dimension Data. I'm quite an avid Yammer ambassador, and I'm hoping now to basically. I think gamification is definitely the next thing that we have to do from a platform perspective. How we pull that into our HR systems, I'd be interested in that as well. But more importantly, if we add gamification, we mustn't take the user away from the platform to go and do those activities. I'd want to see something that keeps them entertained or keeps them engaged still on the platform. So I'm really interested to hear where this can go. I also looked at Badgeville probably about 2.5 years ago. Unfortunately, the costing was a bit steep at that time when I was still just trying to get Yammer out there. So I'm looking for new ideas and even possibly building our own, if that's possible. I've got a team in South Africa that have done something really remarkable with a deaf barista. And the next thing they want to now do is link the rewards that you get with your praise so that you get virtual beans. And then you can go down to the barista and exchange that for coffee. I think it is such an ingenious concept. So, yeah, looking to see what can we do in this space and how can we share what we learned.
Cool. Thanks, Lee.
Hi, it's Peter Goldeye from Fivel. We're in the micro-learning space, and we're working with Microsoft on a couple of other fronts on their CRM and Dynamics applications. And we have gamification as part of our overall platform, but when you get down to a technology-specific gamification, just like the previous example, that's really unique to us. And so we're trying to understand how to continue to evolve our application in support of Microsoft's efforts in moving the adoption needle or consumption needle within their client base.
Okay. Thanks, Peter. I've got a couple of others there. Anyone else? Pino?
Hi, I'll go next. Hi, this is Pinlo. I'm with Educational Testing Service, and I'm just interested in learning how gamification can be used in connection with Yammer. No experience with gamification currently, so looking to hear more about it.
Okay. Thanks, Ben. And Jennifer, I think, is the last person.
Hi, this is shoot. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. This is Jennifer, and we're basically on the forefront of trying to get gamification incorporated in a couple of our content management systems. One of them being SharePoint Online, as well as we're interested in the Yammer and how that works. So I'm pretty new to it, but do have some background in the gaming industry as far as developing games and everything, so the logic and all the programming behind it, but the actual gamification piece of it, we're still kind of learning about that. So here to learn.
Okay, awesome. Look, thanks. Unless there's anyone else, we might just jump into it. What I've got today is I've pulled together a couple of things that just as conversation starters. So I wasn't sure sort of the level of expertise that we'll get in the room, and actually we've got quite an educated audience. We've got some people that use it and quite advanced on the journey, and then there's those that are still sort of starting out. So what I might do is the presentation I've got here is actually from a presentation that I've done elsewhere. But what I might do is actually just talk to some of the bits in this presentation as conversation starters, because I really think that people want to talk about the nuts and bolts, and so we can jump straight into that. But these are some of the things that I thought were pertinent to this conversation. So can people see the refinement of IT slide that's up there at the moment? Yep.
Yes.
Great. Look, if we start talking faster than the slides, let us know. But this was something that I have found really useful in explaining the role of gamification when you're coming into organisations. So traditionally, our technologies have been mainly functionally based. So you've had your HR software, you've had your project management software, you've had your CRMs, and so every sort of business unit has its own database that underpins it. Now, social has been the thing that actually starts to connect us across those systems. So it's a sort of functionally it's a horizontal sort of program rather than a vertical. Now, what gamification is a refinement that sits above that. It's the behavioural layer. So amongst all that data amongst all the data that sits in the social and the functional layer, gamification seeks to align those behaviours or find the paths of excellence, if you like, or the data that pertains to high performance, and starts to bring that stuff to the surface and tell a story. So one of the things that I've found that most people don't get is that gamification is really about data and storytelling using data. So I thought that was an interesting insight. If there's any questions or thoughts, or if that sparks any ideas for anyone, please jump in at any point, because I think the conversation is the thing that we want to start getting moving. The other thing that I've found really useful is this concept. So this levels of activity. So when we're looking at social activity, in particular Yammer, you've got your day-to-day transactional stuff. So this is kind of like the connecting and sharing, all that sort of like working out loud, those sorts of things. Then you've got your tactical or your point-in-time initiatives. So they're your campaigns and competitions. And then you go up into your strategic ongoing gamification. Gamification exists in all three levels of these. So what we do with our clients is, firstly, we've got to get the transactional stuff up and running, but you can start to use gamification elements in that. By the time you get to the tactical stuff, quite often this is where we start building our MVP of a gamified solution, and usually it's pretty manual, but you can actually do a lot with very little using gamification principles at the tactical campaign and competition piece, which tells you whether your idea or the types of motivators that you're tapping into actually have legs, and from that you start to form your strategic. What I've found with the Red Critter, Badgeville, and all those sorts of things is exactly what Jennifer said, is that they are, or was it Lee? Apologies, that they are quite expensive. So you've really got to, and you can actually really annoy a lot of people very quickly. So it's good to build your MVP using just manual means, odds and ends, to actually get it up and running. So I've got an example of an MVP. A lot of the stuff that we do, I've also got a couple of examples of the sort of strategic gamification. But yeah, clients generally don't like these stories being told. But this was one that we created. I was working with the CFO of a large organisation across 50 countries, and their issue was that they had their business units were hemorrhaging working capital. They were mismanaging it to the point where it was costing them an absolute fortune. So what we did was we built a stock market where there were 38 different, all those 38 business units became listed entities on the stock market, and their position on the board was dependent upon their effective use of working capital. So if they use it well and they're hitting the metric, they're at the top of the board and they were green. If they weren't hitting the KPIs, they're at the bottom and they're this depressing grey colour. And what we then did was we went out and we started telling stories of people that were doing cool things to drive more effective use. Now, we did this for two reasons in Yammer. We did it, one, to give them the kudos of having done a good job, but the second one was around spreading that best practice around the organisation. Now, what happened next, and this is not Ross's real photo, I've changed it to protect the innocent, but essentially people started to self-organise and say, guys, we're not at the top of the board, we need to do something about it. And they literally started to form groups, sort of virtual groups in Yammer, to start driving more effective use of their working capital. Now, we didn't tell them how to do this, right? So I got a designer in to design the board, and we uploaded it as a JPEG once a month. We gave away a hunk of plastic every 6 months to the winner. This has now saved, it cost about 12 grand to set up. It's now saved them about 23.4 million, which is a pretty good rate of return. But it's also given us the blueprint for what technology we need to build out next. So from an MVP perspective, it was really valuable. Then we've started to bring in the business tools around it to actually make it a standard feature of their environment.
So Scott, I've got this is Dan here.
Yeah.
I've got a question. So this stock market, it's effectively just a dashboard based on kind of real business performance. Is that right?
Effectively, yeah.
Okay.
Effectively, yeah. But what was intrinsic around this was so there was a couple of things. One was the colouring was really important. So having people that were hitting the metric having green and sort of communicating that's okay, and then there was a social friction around not being green.
Yes.
Then so when you're doing gamification and online influence, there's ways of incentives. There's an incentive program or incentive structure that we use called SAPS. So that's status, access, power, and stuff. Status is putting people on the pedestal. Access is giving them access to some scarce resource, so it could be dinner with the CEO. Power is power of self-determination, so being able to make decisions over yourself and others, and stuff is giveaways. Now they go from most effective to least effective, so people will do more for status than they will for stuff, right? Now the cool thing about that is those first three, status, access, and power, generally speaking, are free. They don't cost a cent. So by them facilitating storytelling where we're putting people on the pedestal, we were purposefully starting to spread status around the organisation in relation to activities that drove more effective use of working capital. So it looks like it's a dashboard, absolutely. It's the combination of those incentive elements though, and building out the user journey over time that actually make it a gamified solution. Does that make sense to people?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, interestingly, we worked on a similar thing. We didn't use a stock market analogy. We used a weather map analogy. So we had a map of the region, and the depending on how you were doing, how a country or a market was doing versus their business plan, they either got a cloud and rain, or just a cloud or a sunshine. And there was a similar behaviours where it was using your term, self-organising, where you had sort of the leaders of each of those organisations kind of emailing their people effectively saying, right, how are we going to improve, from being a cloud to a sunshine.
Yeah, I love it. Because what was really fascinating about this was that it starts to, exactly what you're talking about there, it gives a common language, gives a common focus, and enables that cold-face problem-solving piece. So the amount of emails this saved, the amount of meetings this saved, because there was transparency and alignment across a defined set of behaviours. It's really, really powerful. We was doing some work recently where we did one as a fish tank, and each business unit had its own fish in the fish tank. And if the business unit was hitting its metrics, it was a green fish, and if it wasn't, it turned into a red fish, and it just swam around the tank. And so as people walked through the reception each morning, they could see how many red fish were in the tank and how many green fish. And so it was a very subtle way, and there's guests that came into that company had no idea. But the staff, as they walk past that desk every morning, absolutely they know what's going on in that company. But it's the social stuff. So we could have run this on SharePoint, we could have run it in all sorts of things, but it's what you find with gamification initiatives is that they fatigue, and they can fatigue quite quickly. So it's the social stuff that actually gives it legs. And so the graphic that I showed you before about the functional layer, the social layer, then the behavioural layer, if you go straight to behaviours, you will be able to move the needle, 100%, you definitely will, but it will fatigue a lot faster than if it's a social thing, because there's that group or that individual or group accountability piece that comes into play, and it's very, very powerful. Has anyone else tried anything similar to these sorts of things within Yammer?
Lee, I was just thinking of the DD campaign in regards to meetings anywhere and taking a photo of yourself and the reward for that. It's sort of somewhat similar in a way.
Yeah, that was a good competition. It was, what was it, Microsoft Link Best Office in the World or something like that. And we encouraged users to take a photo. So we had some people with the pyramids in the background, some with waterfalls, other people sitting in the middle of a safari with like giraffes in the background. But that was using just standard Yammer analytics, so your likes and shares and that. We didn't really get a gamification part into it, although it would have led to something, you know, if we could add an add-in, you know, that said, oh, let's do this, and then have a leaderboard. That would have been cool.
Yeah.
Because it was going based on likes rather than
likes.
That's all right. Likes are a currency. They're a social currency, and they're very powerful. The good thing about likes is their value erodes over time and erodes very quickly. So it encourages that repeat competition piece. So Yammer as a platform has gamification elements in it already. When we look at doing gamification, you look at what virtual currencies you can start to reward, and that's exactly what likes are. But also followers. There's a sense of pride around the number of followers you've got, and these are the kinds of social currencies that have been built into the base platform. So it becomes very natural to start to extend those key gamified functions into tactical plays and then further into strategic plays. This is an example actually of a strategic play that I thought was a really good one. This is from Nice. Now these guys work with this is a Badgeville solution, but and they're big in the call center space. So this is is a standard sort of agent screen. You can see that they've got quests down here, so you can actually start to. And quests are a really good way. Like aside from so when you gamify something, there's generally a standard set of KPIs that you're building it around, or standard set of outcomes that you're building it towards. But quests are a good way of introducing short-term sprints or focuses. So it could be, like you can see AHT, so average handle time there, 20% complete. It could be around customer NPS or something like that. So quests become a good way to shift the game over time and to keep it interesting. But again, if we go to the next one, go down the bottom, you can see the comments. So they've now started they've got your classic sort of leaderboard to the left, but you've also got your social stuff there. Now, that is not the most compelling use of social within this context, but definitely you need to have visibility and the ability to start to connect amongst the game in order to make it more sticky. Has anyone noticed that? Actually, has anyone run gamified initiatives with and without social, and seen the difference, or have people noticed social make an impact to their gamification efforts?
In terms of the gamification and adding the social in, most of it, when we're looking at an e-learn platform, did have a level of communication that's actually sat within it, but it was based on teams and really getting teams pitting sort of against each other to make sure it was completed and top of the board in percentage. And when it comes to compliance, it could be a little on the boring side. So it was mainly focused around that, but never to this kind of extent though. Because it had badges. It did have badges and things like that. So, you know, improving on your badge, getting the best possible badge, that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever heard of rise.global. That's the website. We used them last year in July. And what we were doing was, like you said, the algorithm was based on the activity within a specific group in Yammer. But also we were checking the same where they're using specific hashtags also on Twitter, because it was all linked to Twitter France, which was our big thing last year.
I love it.
So we're actually seeing from a leaderboard perspective who was the most active internal employee, but also what was their reach externally, So if they created brand new posts themselves and were resharing, that would get them higher up on the leaderboard. And then we had this leaderboard running for the whole month. And that created a whole lot of excitement.
And Lee, I would think the same thing happened as well around the Tour de France.
Yes, that's what I was just saying.
Yeah.
So I'll be interested to see what we can do this year.
That's a great one, actually. I missed the outcome that you were going for there, Lee. Was it around getting people to participate in the social community, or was it just a fun activity to keep people engaged?
A bit of both. So internally, it was about sharing, liking, especially uploading photos. It was the first time ever we'd actually seen like our logo on the telly every time you switched it on. So it was really very powerful and proud moments for all of us. So this actually encouraged users to upload, to use a hashtag, to put it in the right group. So in the background, we were actually teaching them how to use Yammer, but they didn't really realize that's what they were doing. But it was fun, and we were sharing all these moments. So that was on an internal perspective, and you actually got higher marks or scores if you did it internally, because that was the key focus. But we used the same this Rise.Global to also track if our users were also using Twitter, and were they sharing, were they what was their reach, and all that. So there was a lot of analytics that came back on the external side, but the win for me was actually internally, and year to date it was our highest month of engagement on our platform based on the measure of active engagement, the Tygraph score, and that's the record we need to break this year.
Very nice. What was Rise.Global like as a platform? How did you find it?
It was actually through one of our social consultants. He came and said, let's just try this. And you could use your Yammer ID, just to log in, so that all worked fine. I was a little bit suspicious that there was no admin verification needed, so that was always a bit of a concern. But it basically just pulled the analytics, put it on this dashboard, that then you could see who was moving up and who was moving down. And then, of course, because it's a sport, and I'm not a sporty person, I'm a geek, but the guys were getting really into it, who's going to be in that last race, or the last 5 people, who's going to wear this colored jersey, and we learned a lot about the sport, but there was so much fun being had, because like the riders, our teammates were, trying to get the right position.
Okay. And did Rise.Global, did it plug into Yammer as well? So was it okay, as a pure add-on? So the conversations that occurred in Rise.Global, did you have a social piece, or was the competition happening in Rise.Global and the conversation happening in Yammer?
Conversation and all that was happening in Yammer, just the analytics was tabled into this leaderboard. I then actually still copied and pasted and made it and created my own little dashboard in the info box on the Yammer group, and I'll have little indicators up and down, and I did that on a daily basis, but that was just to make sure that users had a seamless, and that they could always see that data no matter what. But they created nice dashboards that everyone could go in every day and see who was moving up, the top 10, top 20. It was fun.
Yeah, nice. Very nice. Yeah, it's a great example. Actually, I have to go check out Rise.Global. It sounds like a really great little tool.
I'm actually on it at the moment, and they've got boards for nearly everything. So it looks like an interesting spot.
Rise.Global. I'll have a look at it later. Yeah, no, it sounds good. One of the others, actually, I've got another example I can show you guys. This is a Red Critter thing. So Red Critter have a Red Critter tracker, which is like a project management tool. And I thought it was a really interesting use of gamification within the enterprise. So they've got, essentially what it is you've got these, it's an agile project management stuff, so you can actually select your team, you can actually start to allocate jobs to people, and the people that are heading the projects can actually allocate points for the completion of certain tasks. So and they can move those points around. So if a task is getting more urgent. The project manager can incentivize faster action by giving it more points. And what I found really interesting about how Red Critter's approaching it is that they're actually enabling those points to be redeemed within an online store within the organisation that managers can start to put prizes up for. So I don't know about if anyone else out there has found that Nerf Guns at the moment are very, very popular prizes within the corporate space. But also, I like the idea of a paid day off and those sorts of things. So I thought that was a really, building those sorts of things into platforms so that the points actually lead somewhere. I thought was a really clever use of gamification that's starting to come out now.
It is cool. What is a Nerf gun? Sorry.
Oh, it's like a.
Think of a water gun, except it shoots foam bullets. I have foam bullets hidden throughout my house everywhere from teen boys that have shot them for a gazillion years.
Yeah.
Is this an Australian thing?
Well, we have them in Australia as well.
They're over there. Yeah.
Our office is awash with Nerf guns. We have Nerf gun wars in our office.
Fantastic.
Those little foam things, they get into everything, I tell you.
You end up walking home with one stuck to your back, don't you, as well?
Yeah. You can actually have them. They've got computer-controlled ones now as well. So they've got a USB connection. You can now start to move the aim it around the room. It's quite brilliant. They know their market very well. One of the things that I thought could be interesting to hear from people, though, because quite often when you come into gamification, people like to throw levels at things, they like to throw badges at things, but invariably that fails. Yeah, and actually it can actually be a little bit offensive to people, so it can actually backfire. What I found eternally fascinating about this topic is trying to unpick the things that people find important. This came from Steve Sims, who is the chief games officer or something like that for Badgeville. He's worked in gamification or in gaming for something like 25 years. He's a pretty advanced fella. This is his model of things that of intrinsic and extrinsic incentives. These are the things that he thinks is innate in people. That they're striving to get, that he starts to build his, or starts to target his gamification efforts to facilitate. So from an intrinsic perspective, he thinks people like to feel smart, they like to feel successful, socially valued, and they like structure. So bringing order to things, those sorts of things. And then extrinsic, obviously, is stuff. But I'd be interested to hear, I know there's the other one is the Daniel Pink model, where he talks about people's intrinsic motivators or autonomy, mastery, and purpose, and then again extrinsic motivators with stuff. I'd be really interested to hear how have people managed or started to engage the motivators of people. Like, what have you found? How have you started to structure these things, or have you not thought about it at all? So Dan, with the one that you talked about, with the cloud one, what were some of the motivators that started to tap into?
I'm just trying to think it was just something that we kind of tried out, and it was aimed at a very large number of people as well. And I think actually what I think was interesting is that it seemed to do more to the leadership than it did to anyone else, because it was the leadership of the organization who were really sort of communicating out to their people to make sure that their cloud icon, their weather icon, changed from bad to good. So it's quite interesting in that it drove the leadership. But we've had other ones where it's worked, where the leadership have been involved, but it's kind of very much more of a sort of a team effort, and it feels much more like a team effort. But in terms of the motivators, it's definitely wasn't. It wasn't extrinsic. It was because kind of it was like the sort of the things that you described. We didn't use any sort of fancy software like sort of Badgeville or anything like that. It was quite manual the way that we did it. And the key motivators were really around status. People. The one that we did was one that was quite interesting that we did was around praise. And so basically this is the one that I spoke about at the beginning, where you had a company that had introduced a whole set of a new set of brand values, and they wanted their employees to really kind of understand and live these values. And the way that we did this is that we ran this little contest, which was really just a case of people nominating other people in the organization who they felt had done something that was really sort of living up to one of the values. And the clever thing about this was it's really easy to get people to understand something when they actually have to apply it to people that they know. And that this is what they were doing with these values, but yeah, we weren't giving anything away. It was just the kudos of nominating someone, and then people could like nominations as well. So as a nominate, if you were nominated, obviously you got kudos for that, but also as a somebody who was nominating somebody else. It looked good if your nomination had loads and loads of likes, but yeah, not at all extrinsic. But I'm interested, Scott. Do you count the badges as stuff, as an extrinsic reward?
Now this is the thing, right? So a badge. It depends what motivator it's targeting. So do I get a badge because I've mastered something, or do I get a badge because a certain number of people have given me kudos? So if it's the second one, so if that badge comes about because, say, 30 people have given me kudos for something, that badge then becomes indicative of social value. So it really depends on what it is that badge is married into from a base motivator perspective. And this is the thing that people often, that I personally took a while to grapple with, but it can be a bit hard to explain to people, is that there's a difference between a motivator and an incentive. They're two sides of the same coin, 100%, but the incentive or the reward that we give for people needs to marry into a motivator. So a badge without marrying into a motivator is generally speaking offensive, but a badge is married into something that is particularly intrinsic, then that badge has extraordinary value. Now, what we've found when we roll out gamification initiatives within organisations, particularly in technical spaces, what's really fascinating is seeing what appeals to different people within the organisation. So when we've run gamification initiatives, say, with creative teams, or technically creative teams, it's quite often developers like levels, but the designers have liked badges. So, and I think that goes to the different nature. So designers, by nature, are usually quite visual people, whereas developers often take great pride in the level or the quality of their coding. So levels make sense for them, whereas badges make sense for designers. So, I think the answer to the what game mechanic, what do those game mechanics mean? For me, game mechanics are merely storytelling mechanisms that communicate a user journey. So for me, this is all about virtual storytelling as you're going through the different phases of the user experience. So whether it's a level that's most appropriate, if you can put a store of intrinsic value in a particular level, so usually levels are about mastery. So it depends on what you link those. It's a very long answer, but it depends on what you link those game mechanics to from a motivator perspective.
And what would be an example, Scott, of a badge where there isn't a motivator linked to it?
Right. So then if you're talking about, if you're looking to gamify a process that is monotonous from any angle that people just don't like, then because your first port of call when you're building out a gamified solution is to look at the intrinsic motivators that are already present. If there are none, if there are legitimately none, then you switch to extrinsic. So, and then it could be, you might use a status bar and a quest queue to unlock a particular badge. So that could be around a number of transactions complete or something like that. So if that's really monotonous work that nobody likes, then you want to marry an extrinsic value to that badge as well. So, and that could be, and that's where that prize piece comes into it. The issue though with that sort of stuff is they do fatigue, and so you need to up the value of that intrinsic reward periodically, or you need to shift it. There's only so many Nerf guns that you can give out. If you don't like.
That's quite a lot though.
Actually, now hearing myself say that,
times.
I'm not sure that's ever happened, but I'm sure there is at some point. Yeah. From anyone else, any other people? Because any other comments or thoughts that are bubbling to the surface at the moment with people? This is the stuff. If we get this bit right, it doesn't matter what platform we use. It doesn't matter if we've got a pile of post-it notes on the wall, or if it's using some of the features that are endemic within Yammer. If we get this piece right, it becomes a very powerful program.
That's interesting.
I thought I don't know if people are interested, but I thought actually just one quick thing. I told you about SAPs before, so status is kind of things like badges can be a status thing, or levels. Access is like that first class queue at the airport that I never get to go in. Power is that power substitution stuff. Anyone know if we want to disincentivize people, how we do it? Because I thought this was an interesting one. Yeah. Sorry, Kirsty. Kirsty? Well, this is something that I found very powerful, and it's kind of the dark side of gamification. But essentially, if you want to disincentivize people, you take those things away, or you give them a status they don't like, access to something unpleasant, take away their power and limit their stuff. So, and there's big debates at the moment around the use of stick within gamification, and a lot of ethical quandaries. But what I've found is if you're highlighting the people that are performing the most or performing the best, there's a social friction around those who are omitted from that process. So that sets up this social friction that, why aren't I being represented? So even though we look at gamification from a reward perspective, we need to understand that by setting up those reward perspective or those reward structures, that we're also setting in place the social frictions around why aren't I there, or what do people think of the fact that I'm not there. So it becomes it's a two-edged coin. But again, use that one at your peril. It is a very contentious one.
So Scott, are you saying that it's a double-edged coin? That's whenever you're creating a gamification program, you've got to take the rough with the smooth always, or is it only certain types of program that are going to do that?
We would do a lot of that. Sorry, no. We were just we tended to have a bit of that going on. When you're talking about gamification for compliance, it really does have a kind of a bit of a stick that comes with it, because it's who's not doing what they need to do to be compliant. So it did often have that component as a part of dealing with compliance, which was always a little sticky, because it comes down to, are you trying to do something fun, or are you trying to make sure that you're not going to be sued for millions of dollars?
Yeah. What you'll find is...
Sorry, I was just going to say, you could argue that your red fish and my grey rainy clouds and your low stock prices, they're all social friction, aren't they? That they're making people feel bad.
Yes,
absolutely. We did one recently in government organisation that was across a number of government organisations around travel and efficient travel. And so what we did was the leaderboard was all about cost per kilometre. So invariably with gamification, at some point in time, people learn how to game the game. So you've got to find that stat or that KPI or that leveler that can't be gamed. So we did cost per kilometre of travel, and we had and we did that knowing that there was a couple of government departments that were very lavish on their travel, and so their cost per kilometre was sky high. So it was kind of like it's like a game of golf. You wanted to have the lowest score, and that was really interesting. We got a lot of negative pushback, and in the stock market one too, we got a lot of negative pushback. But it was from the people that needed to lift their game. Every now and then, what you'll find is that that you accidentally incentivize the wrong thing, or that you accidentally punish the wrong people. So with every single gamification campaign we've ever done, there's always a group of people that have arced up and said, this is outrageous, how dare you? In some cases they've been right, but in many cases they haven't. Now, the other thing that we often find is that as people start gaming the game, sometimes that works to our advantage, so we just let it run, but other times it doesn't. It works against the goals or the objectives of the campaign, so that's when we need to change the game up. I don't know if people are interested, but I thought it could be worth showing people how we go about building a gamified campaign. Are people interested in that?
Yeah, definitely.
All right. So we use. I don't know if people have heard of BJ Fogg. He's actually he's an academic in persuasive design, and he's got some really amazing models. But what he talks about is that people need three things in order to inspire a behaviour in the digital space. They need the motivator. Sorry, I'm trying to write on my screen that is upright, which is a little bit tricky. They need the ability, and they need a trigger. Now, if all three are in place, if you've got the right motion, if they've got the ability to do it, and there's a trigger that actually inspires that behaviour, then
we're not seeing anything come up yet, Scott.
Oh, really? Can you not see?
Triangle? It's just up now.
Okay.
Yep.
I'll draw slow. How about that? It might take a little while to refresh. So you've got motivator, ability, and trigger now?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So all three need to be present for users to actually participate or inspire that behaviour. So just keeping that in mind, that becomes a really powerful framework to build activity. So what social strategy is about aligning or influencing behaviour over time. Can you see that bit, guys?
Yep.
Yep.
Right. So the user today sits down here. This is where the user sits today. And up to the top right, squiggly star, but this is the target behaviour, or this is the target outcome that we're seeking to reach, right? Now, behaviours go from at the top, it's most complex to least complex. So if we're trying to get people if we're trying to target this behaviour to the top right, we've got to figure out what are the behavioural steps that's in underneath it. So from a campaign perspective, it could literally be join group, could be comment, could be post, like post content, or that sort of thing. So you literally got to break down we break down the behaviours from the the least complex, and then we stack them up to the most. Now what we do is that across time is we marry out our triggers. So this, at the very least, the first bit could be a notification email. And what we'll see then is if we put the right incentive in that, so this is where SAPS is good, so we allocate some sort of incentive, or we talk about the program or what it is that we're looking to achieve. What we expect to see is, and say the target behaviour is join, we expect to see that behaviour shoot up. Now if that's where we leave it, it ends up dropping off. So at this point where they get up to this first target behaviour, we've got to put in a second trigger. Now that could be another email, it could be a story on SharePoint, it could be anything, right? But you've got to figure out where the user's spending time. So this essentially this becomes our new user, and then the second trigger points it up to get it to the next bit, and this is our returning user. And then again, if that's where we leave it, we expect to see that behaviour drop off. So we need to put in a third trigger, which becomes our expert user. Now, what we'll often do with a new user, because we're not going to get everyone round one, we'll plot out how often we want to engage that user. So that new user trigger might go out once a week, it might go out whatever it is. And the reason why breaking it down into these three user groups at a minimum, at an absolute minimum, is because the emotional needs and the incentives for a new user are very different from a returning user and are very different from an expert user. So in the returning user phase, when we're trying to inspire this piece of behaviour, what we'll do is we'll take a story from last week's new user and position them within the community in somehow. So we'll allocate them some sort of incremental status in order to get them to come back and take further actions. So returning users about coming back and perhaps putting a comment or something like that, and the expert user could be coming back about they might have posted, but we then want to get them to collect likes from other people. So you've got to build out this, bearing in mind that you've got to spell out the steps really clearly so that they have the ability, they know what it is that's expected of them. There is a corresponding trigger to take them from the new user to returning user, and an aligned motivator. So an expert user has a very different motivator to a new user. Someone who's looking to get engaged for the first time needs to know it's safe, and there needs to be something in it for them. But somebody who's already committed, such as the expert users, just needs a nudge to take that next step. So whether that's to collect likes or corral people into supporting them in the platform. And so I've got an example actually of a campaign we did a while back. This is what it looks like. This is what it starts to look like as we build it out. So we planned out all our triggers and stuff like that. So from this we're able to build a weekly communication plan. We're able to talk. We're able to allocate like status across the duration of the campaign, and we're also able to allocate roles to different people. So comms has a really important role to play here, as does the community managers, as does team leaders. So what we've often done when we're running campaigns within Yammer as our proof of concept is we've then put leaderboards from a team perspective around which team has contributed the most as well. And the reason we do that is because we're specifically targeting team leaders to bring it up in their team meetings. So this is the way that we start to plan out our user journeys in order to build a gamified campaign. Any thoughts or questions on that, or is that 10 minutes you'll never get back?
It was good to listen to.
Do you guys use something similar, or how do you guys go about it?
I've never developed one yet.
Okay, it's actually really straightforward. If you start breaking down the user experiences, and you remember SAPS is one of the most powerful incentive allocation of incentive I don't know, methodologies or whatever you want to call it that I've seen to date. And if you remember BJ Fogg's stuff and you start to marry them together, it actually becomes quite clear and it becomes very, very exciting. So if we've done this I use this on executive teams. So because one of the most important things around building out Yammer activity is getting the executive team on board, and I'm yet to meet any executive team that wasn't fiercely competitive. So building out a new user experience for executives, returning user, expert user, and having them compete against each other to be the most digital or whatever it is a really powerful way of getting them to start to participate.
Now that already has my interest, because I think I need to do some more in that space. It's kind of weird. We're definitely starting to feel the generation gap. So
it's a bit of a change management piece, isn't it?
Yep.
It is. But
it's change management philosophy.
Look, you guys might be nicer than me, but I use equal portions of vanity and fear when I'm dealing with senior executive teams. And it's really powerful. So people want to be seen as the most digital leader. What I've found is senior executives are very aware of personal legacy. Absolutely, they definitely want to get money in the bank through whatever means has sort of been allocated to them. But in alignment to that, they are very aware of how they're being perceived within the organisation. And so if you give them a roadmap to excellence, it becomes very powerful, very, very powerful. So we're nearly at time. What would be great is to just go around and get some feedback. Thoughts. Was the conversation? I personally found this conversation brilliant. I'm going to be looking up the global one that you were talking about there. But has this session been useful? What do people think? Do we need to? I mean, is there interest in connecting periodically and perhaps sharing the chair and talking about our own activities within gamification? It'd be great to go around and just hear people's thoughts.
It was valuable for me. I appreciated this, Stan, and I'm willing to be involved in an ongoing one.
Thanks, Stan.
Yeah, I think this is Dan. I think it's been really, really interesting. We've always approached gamification, I guess, very much from a trial and error basis, and it's been interesting to see some of the theory and the science behind it, which to be quite honest with you, I've never really thought about it, which might make it sound a bit naive, but it is really interesting to see that. I guess what would be interesting for the future is to see. I think it's always really interesting to see this theory, but also to see the real life examples alongside it, and using those to kind of confirm the theory and say, so we can say, oh yeah, here this is the SAPs at work here, and actually pointing to a real life example that shows that. So I'd definitely be up for doing another one of these or a few more of these, definitely.
Okay. Sometimes the challenge in these things is confidentiality agreements with clients.
Yes.
Quite often, a lot of the stuff that you're talking to when you're doing gamification stuff points directly to people's competitive advantage, or it points to the things that aren't going well within their organisation. So gaining client permission and sign-off is actually really tricky. But perhaps we could talk about it maybe we can sanitize some of the examples. I'm not sure. I think it depends on who's bringing the example to the table, but it's definitely something to keep top of mind, that it's often easier said than done to bring examples to the table.
Right, yeah.
What if we worked on something as simple as increasing the adoption of Yammer, and how do we bring that into the platform? If we work on something that we can all benefit from, that can then become the use case for those who are looking for, the confidential solutions. So simple things around getting users to complete their profiles, community managers updating their groups, the info tabs, maybe deleting groups. There are so many user-orientated tasks that need to be done on the platform, And for me, I don't believe this is an IT thing anymore. You know, the responsibility has shifted 100% to the user. But if we create something that makes it fun, you know, and maybe there is a badge if I'm a super duper user and I've, you know, done all my tasks for the month, you know, that for me would be a great way for us to collectively work on something.
Okay. Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, maybe we need to take that. Maybe we need to take that bit as a conversation into the Yammer group. Maybe we need to actually probably have a gamification Yammer group, rather than just bombarding the existing Yammer group. Why don't we start?
So many.
Yeah, that's true. Any other comments or thoughts, closing thoughts before we wander off?
Thank you from my side to everyone who woke up at crazy hours.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it. This for me was
a big thanks
awesome.
to Dan for organising.
Yeah, thank you, Dan.
Well, no, that's fine. Thank you, Scott, for the crazy hour. That's it's impressive.
Yeah, it's definitely crazy. The next time we'll make it less crazy for this side of the world. Anyway.
We'll have to change the hour next time round.
Sounds like a plan.
Okay.
All right, guys, I've got to wander off, but thanks for everyone. It's been a really valuable conversation. I really enjoyed I had no idea that we had such depth of knowledge around gamification and such an emerging interest in gamification around in the Yammer community. So really pleased to connect with you all.
Cool. Well, thank you very much.
All right, guys. See you later.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, bye.